and just transition for workers, communities and young people. The focus tonight will be green jobs just and just transition. Other aspects of climate debate won't be argued tonight, but there'll be further opportunity at later dates. But you can raise questions on the chat line and at the intervals afterwards. I will be taking all the speakers first. Two haven't turned up yet, but the remaining time we have tonight will be for questions and answers. But we begin on a sad note as well. I think we've all heard about Theresa Stewart, a wonderful lady who passed away at the age of 90, 72 years a member of the Labour Party. She'd done a lot of work for people in Birmingham. She promoted the Workers' Memorial Day. She promoted health and safety campaigns, the Health and Safety Advice Centre in Birmingham, Pregnancy Advisory Service, and a great many other achievements to her name and to her lasting memory. So, brothers and sisters, can we have 1 minute silence, please, for the memory of Theresa Stewart? Okay, thank you. Yeah. Unfortunately, Howard Beckett, one of the speakers, our final speaker tonight, has sent his apologies. Liam Byrne, our first speaker, has not yet turned up. He'll be arriving late. Can we begin, please, with Councillor Lisa Trickett, Birmingham City Council Chair and West Midland Combined Authority Scrutiny Committee. Lisa?
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you, comrades, for the invitation to speak and share time with you again tonight. I think what I want to do is really set the frame for, I thought I was coming after Liam, so I'd written something that's slightly different, but I want to set the frame for where I think the climate emergency came from and actually how we need to build a common cause amongst key communities in our city. First, let's be clear that there is a declaration of a climate emergency in Birmingham because absolutely we know from the science that we have to actually stay within 1.5 degrees warming if we're not going to see catastrophic climate change. So it is a matter of life and death for us to stay within 1.5 degrees. We also know there is an absolute need to act now. And that requirement was amplified, has been amplified over the last couple of years by hundreds of young people who've taken to the streets and engaged politically in climate strikes. And was it just September 20th last year, thousands took to the streets of Birmingham in a national day of action. And that very much pushed the council into that declaration of a climate emergency. What I think is also then apparent is, as some of the technical work has gone on over the last year, what we do know is that if we don't do anything in Birmingham, we've used up our carbon budget in 7 years. So we will have failed in 7 years' time if we don't do anything now. And at the combined authority level, they have to have actually have been 80% of the way into delivering on their climate requirements in the next 5 years to even get to 2040, let alone 2030. So absolutely, this is not the time for inaction. Colleagues amongst you will know Birmingham has not exactly covered itself in glory as a council in taking forward some of this work speedily. What I would say in that is what has been really obvious since many of us took part in the call to action is the sheer lack of capacity and capability left within the council. New austerity had ripped the heart out of local government. I think it has really laid bare how much has been lost and how much the absolute understanding of what makes our city work has been lost. And clearly, life isn't made any easier by a mayor who seems to be only interested in something that requires a high-vis jacket and a hard hat, and clearly, absolute absence of leadership nationally. What we have to remember is clearly we also have a number of other complications in our midst. Government's attention, rather than climate, has been prior to March of last year, very much on Brexit. And we have to take lessons from Brexit. We have to remember that in Brexit, the white working class saw no return or any actual recognition of their very real or perceived fears from the EU. For left behind communities, it was a vote of protest. If we do not respond to climate action in a way that delivers social justice, we run the risk of repeating another Brexit. And we cannot afford that in our country. And you can already start to see it with the kickbacks against air quality measures. And indeed, in my own ward, I'm piloting for my sins low traffic neighbourhoods, and people feeling threatened and having something imposed upon them is a very real thing. And obviously now we have just gone through, and a massive challenge we have to own and be realistic too. We have gone through a real life crisis. We have gone through COVID. People have experienced lockdown. People have experienced being unemployed. And what that has laid bare is the absolute fragility of our social and economic systems. And it doesn't need me to tell you that the systems we have are not working for communities or frontline workers, that absolutely this is a requirement for system change. What I think we've also all come to realise as we've been sort of exploring this issue in the last year is this very real fact that in our city and in many other areas, we are certainly not talking about one transition. We're talking about multiple transition. We have communities that haven't as yet recovered from globalization, deindustrialization. You add on to that austerity, technological change, and then you now add on to that automation, climate change, and the impact of COVID. And actually,
sorry, I'm just leaving that meeting. Sorry.
That's okay, Dennis. When you actually see what that must feel for people whose jobs are under threat, we have to appreciate we are working in a period that unless we can actually start to show that the action we take for climate is about retraining workers, is about repurposing supply chains, is about investing in a future that gives a real measurable return for the worker and communities we serve, we're not going to get there. So we have to also understand that in many ways, this is not going to be easy because most of the people who hold the power actually quite like the system. It suits them. It is them who have created the system. You will see the big four sitting on the left. They sit on the combined authority economic boards. The same people's voices are replicated in our region's decision-making structures. And again, what we absolutely need to do over the next year ahead is to challenge those structures and find better structures, better institutional arrangements that reflect our communities and our concerns of our cities and towns. I think there is a way forward, and Ian referenced it right at the start. We need a Green Deal. We absolutely need a West Midlands Green Deal. We need a new Green Deal that offers a new way forward, a new deal for workers and communities. We need to respond to those very real concerns. I've taken up in the last week some major issues I've got over housing and the fact that the Combined Authority is not delivering on social housing. At the same time, we also know in terms of housing retrofit, 85% of the houses will be with us by 2050. Now that is a huge challenge, a huge amount. There's probably about £3 billion worth of investment required in housing retrofit. But we could think about it differently. We could think about what do actually people who occupy homes, people like my mum, very low income, but they own their house and they want to stay in that house. Well, maybe we can find ways of helping them stay in their house and also retrofitting that house. What we have to do is start to think of ways that will make communities feel that climate change is about them and the response is about them. And in many ways, what we could be doing is we could be building today modular housing that is responding to the families in bed and breakfast. We could be freeing people who are in squalid, overcrowded accommodation so that we can properly clear that and redevelop new zero carbon housing. We need to look at a couple of areas, be it housing, be it transport, to actually have that whole system pathway, because this is whole system, whole place change. And what we have to do is recognise it ain't sexy, it's not easy. In a region as poor and low skilled as ours, it's going to be hard work. But unless we confront the challenge and set out the pathway, we won't get there. Two final sort of points by me. The importance of delivering now and showing real things. One of my comments I always make is that I was a young graduate researcher in this city when the metro was first being laid, and Roger, the previous leader of Wolverhampton, was a young man. He's now retired, and I'm long past being a young graduate researcher. It has taken too long to bring through that system. When we actually look at what we've got, we have green connecting pathways across our region. We need to build upon those assets to actually provide a way forward. In Birmingham, we have canals and canal pathways that link some of our major growth points where there are jobs and where there's opportunity, but they're not lit, so people don't use them. There are some very simple here and now initiatives that can make a change. And then my final point is, we have to remember there is power in a union. And again, comrades, you are the last people I need to be telling that to. But one of the things people will know, I professionally have been doing quite a bit of work in the sort of climate energy sphere. And we've been doing some discussions with the GMB, and what you can actually learn from the people who are there working, installing stuff, the utilities workers, is amazing. And one of the things we need to do is to ensure the innovation that is held in our universities learns from the people who are going to have to implement this. And then finally, what we have to do is understand also that for many of the workers who were going to be impacted by this, they're actually self-employed. They are builders. They are the van drivers. They are part of that economy that has come through. But if any of you were on the session that Dave Smith spoke about blacklisting, and Ravi was on it as well, that ability to work with construction workers, with the self-employed, and develop common purpose could well be our way through climate change. So I firmly believe an important way forward is through community organising. And if need be, we need a union of communities to build a Green Deal for our region. Thank you, comrades.
If you can all unmute, please, and give a round of applause to Lisa for her excellent contribution tonight. Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Our next speaker tonight will be Liam Byrne, MP.
Ian, could you unmute yourself?
Great, thanks.
Okay.
All good, thank you. Right, evening everybody. Thanks so much for inviting me along, and a great pleasure to follow on from Lisa. I'm going to underline a few of the points that Lisa made. I'm going to start. I've posted a link in the chat just to a book that I brought out a couple of weeks ago called Just Transitions, because I really want, one of the things that Lisa mentioned is incredibly important. So the reason that this argument is more important now than ever is not simply because we need a good old-fashioned demand-side kickstart to the economy to get people back into jobs, but because it's not just about recovering from today's economic crisis. Figures out today showed that we have been hit pretty much the hardest in the G7. We in Birmingham now have unemployment that is already back up at the level that it was in 1987. We have youth unemployment at about 20%. We have unemployment at about 14%. And the worst is in many ways still to come. And the government's mishandling of this crisis now means that we have got a big job to do here in the region to make sure that we maximise all opportunities to defend the people that we came into the Labour Party and the Labour movement to serve, protect and to advance. But it's not just about recovering from COVID now, because we have to grapple with what's called in the book the three rises: the rise in temperature, the rise in technology and the rise of trade conflict. So let's take trade conflict first. If there is not a Brexit deal done in 10 days' time, that is a hammer blow for the manufacturing industry across the West Midlands in general, and the car industry in particular. We already have 300,000 workers in the manufacturing sector on furlough. Frankly, many will lose their jobs if Boris Johnson decides to gamble with a no deal, and not only leave a country in lockdown, but leave us locked out of our most important market in Europe. Second, though, it's pretty clear to us that automation is now going to accelerate as a result of what's happened. Automation could probably cost somewhere between 120,000 and 200,000 jobs in Birmingham alone. And that's before we get into the challenges of dealing with rising temperatures as well. So, you know, we have actually got an amazingly difficult set of challenges to navigate over the next 10 years. And for all of those reasons, that is why we need a just transition. And the argument of the book is that we need a new social contract too. Now, that social contract, I think, is a second Bill of Rights moment. It is a Bill of Rights that enshrines the right to work, the right to train, the right to retrain. But that entails very significant changes to the social security system that we have in our country. In an economy where jobs are churning faster and faster, then the fact that we have a government that is prepared at this moment in time to shut down Union Learn, one of the most successful training and retraining systems that we've ever created in our country, tells you everything that you need to know about not only the competence, but the compassion and the corruption of this government. That new social contract is going to need to be paid for. And that will require a new settlement on tax, where we begin asking the wealthy to actually begin paying their fair share, and asking corporations like Amazon to start paying their fair share too. But there are opportunities to mobilize investment too, particularly the investment that we have tucked away as our pension savings. And one of the things that I hope we can explore next year is the way in which we can mobilize pension savings in the West Midlands much more effectively to invest in infrastructure and in creating jobs. So we've got a big task ahead of us. We've got some significant challenge that we've got to advance as a Labour movement. And we should be the pioneer of this in the West Midlands. This is the region that started the carbon revolution. We started the industrial revolution. We now need to lead the green industrial revolution. And that is what I hope to put centre stage in the mayoral race next year. We have a mayor today who thinks that 2041 is the right target for going net zero carbon. That is too slow. We need to move that target much more aggressively forward and actually bring as a Labour team in the Metro Mayor, the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Labour councils, trade unions, our MPs. We need to be pulling together around the Green New Deal for our region that does 4 or 5 significant things. The most important thing is create jobs. That is why we need that investment kickstart. Retrofitting is one of the ways in which we can create jobs fastest. Building new net zero carbon homes is another. Installing clean energy systems is another. These are jobs-rich interventions that we should be mobilising investment behind. Second, we need, as Lisa said, to drive hard around building affordable homes for social rent, which are good for the environment too. That is not just a good way of creating jobs, it is a way to begin accelerating the decarbonisation of our housing stock. Third thing we need to be doing is we need to be mobilising community action around clean energy systems. If you look at what the Welsh Assembly government are doing, for example, they are ensuring that any new clean energy initiative that is brought forward includes community ownership of a significant proportion, so that genuinely, not only does the region seek a path to, energy independence, if you like, but actually we take that community wealth building approach and seek to actually ensure that the energy systems of the future are actually owned by the communities that they serve. Our air needs to be cleaner. The fact that we have an 8-year gap in life expectancy between inner city Birmingham, in my patch in Allen Rock, and say Sutton Coldfield, is not unrelated to the fact that the air in my part of Birmingham is toxic. And I know this because I carry an air quality monitor around with me when I go out door knocking or doing street surgeries when we were allowed to do that. And what you see is that, standing on Green Lane for an hour while you're doing a street surgery, you look at the air quality, it's toxic, it's life-threatening. And so unless we can drive through a strategy for clean air transport systems, then we're not going to address problems like that, which don't hit people equally. They hit the poorest hardest. We know that cleaner air saves lives, but the lives that we save are inner city lives too. Thanks very much. And then I suppose the final point really that I wanted to make is about the mode of change. So we have sought to marry our argument for a Green New Deal to this agenda that's been pioneered in Preston around community wealth building. And I will dig out the link in a minute for the co-op task force that reported about 2 or 3 weeks ago, because what that begins to show is that in parts of our city, we can begin mobilising good people, good actors, anchor institutions in our community around this idea of cooperative innovation districts to actually try and galvanise a whole range of actors and community organisations around this business of delivering a Green New Deal actually on the ground. Because it's no good having these kind of grandiose statements that work well on leaflets and on the telly and so on. I need something that's going to work on the Bromford estate in Hodge Hill. And if it doesn't work at that level for me, if it doesn't deliver climate justice, if it doesn't deliver a just transition for the residents of estates like that, then it's not going to work at all. So I think there's a lot of ideas that are now in the mix for those who want to continue the conversation after tonight. We've actually brought Matt Pennycook, who is the Shadow Minister for Climate Change, along with Darren Jones, who's the chair of the Bays Select Committee. Darren led on the Citizens Assembly that actually was commissioned by 6 select committees, actually met in Birmingham. Lisa is kindly chairing it, and that is at 2:30 next Tuesday, because we want to put these ideas centre stage in the campaign for the Metro Mayor next year. But this can't be a top-down policy agenda. It's got to be bottom up, and that's why tonight is so welcome. Thanks very much.
Okay. If we can all unmute, please, and give a good round of applause to Liam Byrne. Okay. Our next speaker tonight will be Lamar Campbell, President of Leicester University Labour Students. Lamar Campbell.
Hi there. So I can't, of course, give an in detail talk about how the council can respond or how government can respond so as much. So I'll be just talking about the issues and the strength of feeling within young people and students on campus, and also a few ideas and a bit of an encouragement to people that want to change the way we're doing things. So just to set the scene, this year we're obviously, at this time of the year, it's obviously a hurricane season, for the tropics, typhoon season as well. And in the Philippines, are suffering under Typhoon Vanko, which is the fifth storm in the Philippines. 10 days ago, there was another huge one which made people homeless. And obviously, living in camps, now suffering another wave of storms, similar for the Caribbean and Central America. Even more storms, so 30 tropical storms have been recorded. This means landslides in Jamaica, floods of entire regions, and evacuations. It's so extreme and severe that they've run out of alphabet characters. If you know how they name storms, you know it'll be the first storm will be called like Alfred or something for A, going to Z like Zeta. And they've run out of alphabet characters and expecting 30, which is a record since records began, I believe. Also for the UK, more locally, we're expecting 4% rise in the highest rainfalls over a 5-day period. So it means like every time it rains, like we're going to be expecting a huge amount of huge increase in severity of those flash floods that we see in like in the home counties more predominantly, but also in Birmingham when closer to our rivers. Also by 2070, summers are expected to be 57% drier and 3% wetter in summer, and then in winter expecting 2% drier winter seasons and 33% wetter season in general. So imagine the rainfall things we're expecting by a complete third in 50 years. That'll flood a lot of the UK. So what actions can we take on climate change? I think what we're doing this because it's obviously existential threat. As trade unions, as working people, it's simply an existential threat, and it's for survival, pretty much. We're doing this because this will affect people of all backgrounds, and most predominantly the people of the global south that we're seeing already that's feeling the greatest strain and to the greatest degree. I talk about climate justice as a referral to people who are already suffering in those dire straits in the global south primarily, but also meaning that the people that will be funding to fix this issue will be organisations such as BP and Shell that are the primary cause of the suffering, because they have refused to step back in the mass production and the consumption of the toxic have not helped in us moving forward into renewable energies. A key example of this recently is actually the Ogoni protest campaign that was taken up in the Niger Delta. Instead of coming to some conclusion, a precise step forward, it ended up in the hanging of the protesters. One of those being Kensaro Wiwa, I think I said his name right, in 1995, and his fellow organisers. So we also need to talk about the other crisis that we're facing, obviously COVID-19, the economic crisis as well. All of these massively linked. The regional unemployment, as has been said already, means that thousands of people have being made jobless, on top of all already poor paying jobs and already poor quality jobs. And the reason by that I mean poor contracts, terrible working conditions, etc., etc. Thankfully, we've had Unite and Labour running a campaign talking specifically that we need to find ways to keep people in work. And the TUC have obviously talked to the government and had us run a furlough scheme, which has helped save a lot of people's jobs, kept people in work, meaning households are well fed and etc. to some degree in this first lockdown. We should continue on that vein and be talking about the biggest, like, where we need to have, we can specify this on a local level to address that we need jobs in the areas that are the biggest threat to our public safety. So that would be healthcare, that would be green jobs, that would be social care, and that would be jobs that will be dealing with the inequality at large. We also have the coming to a Christmas season, which means we'll see the real impact of the economic crisis after Christmas, I believe. So flagship stores like John Lewis in New Street have obviously shut down, but it'll be far more easy to see the problem with our economy after Christmas, when our high street stores are unable to make it through the lack of demand over the Christmas period. So what we should be doing is hiring, and as a council, as a combined authority, and making that argument as a general labour movement that we should be hiring from all levels through the state for apprenticeships, all the way up to academic level, all the way up to the high academia level, to develop those arguments and to develop those systems that will help us through this and bring us closer to being a carbon zero region. That would be retrofitting maintenance programs for city housing, council housing, the cycling scheme, small things like this, alternative energy, alternative transport, and massively public-owned transport systems. We can talk about that again in terms of COVID, because we've seen how TfL has almost been on the verge of collapse, and the lack of finance, because of the lack of demand, and a Tory government that refuses to put money back into that and further that agenda. This will happen also in Birmingham, as we've seen to some degree with the West Midlands transport systems, the trams during this first lockdown. I believe they were struggling for money because people weren't going to work. But instead of just begging people to go to work, we need to have the state invest back into the public systems. So just to finish off quickly, I haven't written too much, but as a bit of an encouragement. So this is a great opportunity for us as trade unionists to make that argument, to restructure how we do things locally, how we're told to do things from government in the face of COVID-19 and the recession and the climate crisis. Stepping in only as a council and as governments can, and to propose that young adults from all levels, through apprenticeships, the lesser high skills all the way up to academia, they have a part to play in getting us through this crisis. We should be hiring it from all levels. I think that's pretty much sums up what I'm going to say. Thank you for listening. Just.
Okay. If we can all unmute, please, and thank Lamar for his excellent contribution. Now, our next speaker tonight will be Ravi Subramanian. Ravi is also the West Midlands Regional Secretary for Unison the Union. Okay, Ravi.
Hi, thank you all. Sorry for being late. I had another thing that I had to be on, but I did manage to get to this one on time. Just before I start, one thing I'm going to say is I've actually got some credentials on this issue that go beyond my being the Unison Regional Secretary, because before I worked for Unison for 10 years, I worked in local government energy efficiency, working for 3 different councils doing energy efficiency and green installations. I'm a chartered engineer. I've got a lot of experience of doing this when it was definitely less fashionable. So, you know, it seems odd that 20 years later, 20 years, it's 20 years since I last worked in wind energy efficiency. We're still talking about it now, but so it's something that I personally still think is really, really important. And let's say it's a shame it's taken this long for people to catch up in terms of knowing that it was important to be done. I'm just going to be clear about what I'm going to be saying today as well. Is policy that's been determined by Unison, and our Unison policy is determined by primarily at two different levels, either by our elected National Executive Council, our NEC, or at our National Delegate Conference. So there are some things, some positions that Unison hold that maybe are in a little bit of tension with some people in the environmental movement, but they are democratically agreed policy by our union. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And I guess I'm going to start with the two contentious areas for Unison, or sometimes where we find ourselves rubbing up against some of the environmental campaigners, is with respect to the gas industry and sort of like replacing the gas industry. Unison back hydrogen. Now, Friends of the Earth and one or two other environmental organisations don't back replacing methane gas with hydrogen, but that is a policy of our union. And certainly the one thing with the use of hydrogen is that it is zero carbon. It is zero carbon. And it's about using the existing infrastructure. I don't know if people know about the H21 project that's being run in Leeds, where they're going to be looking at a certain part of Leeds to bring that on, the pilot project to bring that onto hydrogen use over the next few years, to see whether it's possible for it to be done and how it can be done. So that's one area where we don't always in agreement with other people in the environmental activists. And we have got a little bit of scepticism around the UK net zero target by 2030, because what we've really got to be honest about, what does that mean? Well, if we want net zero by 2030, it's probably going to mean emergency legislation to ration consumption. And in reality, you probably might need the army to seize people's cars, because if you want net zero by 2030, a lot of the cars that are on the road now will not be able to be on the road. So are we actually prepared as a country to do that? Or, we've got to be honest about what some of these things mean. Just sort of like come to the areas where I think there will be a lot of commonality, in areas where I think really important that we can work together with other people on, for sure. I think the most important one is end to fuel poverty, because as trade unionists, we're interested in social justice. Primarily, trade unions as social justice organisation, trade union movement and the labour movement as social justice organisation. Of course, environmental justice is allied with social justice, but fuel poverty is a real massive issue. And by tackling fuel poverty and ensuring that we have a proper insulation programme for houses around the country, not only do we reduce the amount of energy that we use, we make it cheaper for people to heat their homes, and you have the spin-off of putting loads of people into work, and it's skilled work that's relatively well paid. It seems a bit of a no-brainer, really, for us not to be pushing that hard, because it gives jobs, keeps people's homes warm, gets their bills down, and reduces CO2 emissions. Another one that's, again, very strong Unison policy, and I know a lot of people in the labour movement would support this, is public ownership of the utilities. We've got a ludicrous situation, and I started my working life doing energy efficiency just at the point where the commercial gas and electricity market was deregulated, and you could buy your gas and electricity from 1,000,001 different suppliers. And this was before it was domestic. I'm talking about when it was commercial, for commercial and large buildings. And in reality, it's just made things more complicated for people. We'll be in a far better position if we want to have strategic control and have that strategic control about our environmental emissions, to have public ownership of the key utilities. Another thing that Unison have been doing, and we're not particularly, we don't necessarily do this within the labour movement, but we do it. We do it ourselves and with one or two others of the trade unions, is campaigns around the pension fund. So the local government pension fund is a massive, massive pension fund. Although there are lots of different pension funds around the country, when they're all managed according to the same set of legislation and rules. But we have been having a massive campaign to work with the pension funds in terms of fossil fuel divestment. And that's the thing that we will continue to do, because the pension funds can have a massive influence on not just the way that the energy industry operates, but the way lots of other things operate, because they put massive investments into what goes on in the country. So that's an important but sort of like underground, often not seen, what's going on, because that work is done in the sort of like not in the boring dry committee rooms anymore, because it's all done online as this meeting, but it's one of those things that's done quietly in those rooms, in those meeting rooms with the pension fund administrators, where our pension fund reps are trying to make that case. So, I mean, I'll end with saying, you know, in terms of what do I think, because we're here talking about what about Birmingham, and you know, it's the biggest council in the country. Keep being told, I don't know whether it still is the biggest council in Western Europe or not, but it's the biggest council in the country. It should be leading the way on the green agenda. We need a Labour council to be making it absolutely clear what can be done, showing real leadership, and there is an opportunity, particularly, as I said, things like a programme to insulate houses and keep houses warm for people on low incomes. It puts money in people's pockets, it takes CO2 out of the air, and it gives people decent jobs. So we really need to see Birmingham City Council taking a lead on things. It's been great that we've had this, having this meeting, but we need to see more from the City Council in terms of how they're going to show leadership to the residents of the city and the rest of the country. I'll finish there.
Thank you. If you can all thank Mary for this excellent contribution. Okay. Right. Our final speaker for tonight will be Jules Todd from the Climate Action Network West Midlands. Jules.
Thank you, Ian, and evening, everybody. I wasn't intending to do a big speech or anything. I just want to make a couple of points, some of which leading on from what's already been said, but mainly I wanted to suggest some practical things that the Trade Union Council might support and the people in the room might support as a way forward, because Climate Action Network is about two things. One is networking, and you know, we have had some success in making different communities aware of each other and what they're doing and what they stand for, and also getting more people to take some action, including hopefully eventually getting the council to take the issue seriously. A couple of things. The trade union movement in the UK is still, you know, a force to be reckoned with. I think 6.5 million members, and at the moment it's not. It doesn't really have much of an influence on the kind of discussions that are going on. So there's plenty happening. Every day I get new emails about this, that, and the other aspect of green recovery or transitioning the energy system, etc., etc. But all these decisions are being made without much, if any, input from the labour movement and the organised trade union movement. And that includes the pretty tokenist representation that currently exists on the council task force and at combined authority level. And I think one of the things that we might collectively decide to do is make more noise and demand more of a voice. The other thing I'd like to say is one of the reasons the council have not really grasped this issue and done much is they're hiding behind a notion that the council is broke, which is true, and therefore the money has to come from the government. Now, clearly there are national policy issues and national investment required, but what we find in the economy in general is there is no shortage of money. Capital is ridiculously cheap at the moment, and there is tons of money. The money is controlled by a tiny minority acting in their own interest, and it's being invested in the wrong things, including massive subsidies for fossil fuels, for example. And those people, those forces, the power base that control those capital resources are not going to just give them up. It's not like they don't get it. We can explain it logically and go, oh, now I realise I'll invest in better housing for people living in fuel poverty. That isn't going to happen unless we fight for it. And the only way of fighting for it is to create some kind of popular movement which engages, exactly as Lucy said right at the beginning, the communities who actually are losing out on the existing system and stand most to gain from a just transition to a better system. So the trade union movement clearly got a massive potential role in that, but so far not sort of engaging gear and moving on it in the broad sense. I mean, there are clearly exceptions to that, and a lot of people doing their best, but it's not happening on a big scale. Yeah, so the practical things that we could consider doing, and I'd like to generate some kind of discussion in the hour that remains on this, is one of the things that CanWM did, well, this is the second version of it, is produce this sort of fold-out leaflet. I don't know if you can see that. It's for general consumption, and it includes lots of, it explains why we need to do climate action. But the key thing is there's a ton of practical stuff that people can do, people and organisations. And one of the things we could consider doing collectively is a sort of upgrade and rewrite of that that's oriented to workplace union organisations. So what can the employers where those people work do now about revising their supply chain, about shifting from fossil to renewable energy, for looking at the environmental impacts of their product line, etc., 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 and also looking at the microeconomic perspective on what everybody so far has said about creating green jobs. Where does the innovation happen? Most innovation, frankly, happens in companies of all shapes and sizes. Academics do a lot of research, but actually translating that into ground level action is done by industrialists, innovators, whatever. So I think workplace union organisations could be more engaged in this at a practical local level that's specific to them, because those people who work in those industries know how they work and what happens and what might be possible to change. So that's something we could consider. I said earlier, raising our voices collectively about better representation of trade unions of all sectors on climate and industrial strategy forums in the city and the region. We're probably the only group collectively who are going to be really serious about just transition. And I would add education and training. It's been a real struggle, uphill struggle, getting the Council Climate Action Task Force to be serious about education and training. We did finally get a bit of a thin wedge in there that they would consider it, but it just wasn't on their agenda. And that's clearly not right, it's nonsense. We need especially to think about retraining people who are affected in what generally is called sunset industries. So if the fossil-based industrial base is having to change rapidly as part of this just transition, a lot of current jobs will either change radically or go completely. And I'd add automation on that as well. Classic example of that is self-driving cars. So what's that going to do for the people who drive cabs? If they're electric cars, what's it going to do for all the people who maintain the diesel engines? So a lot of people are going to need retraining, and a lot of other people are going to need training up into jobs that maybe currently don't even exist. So that's something we should be pushing on hard. CanWM has done some work on action in schools, and we've got a launch. I'll put a link in the chat in a minute of a support package for climate champions in every school, which we've had a lot of support from the NEU on that initiative. So that's another example of a sort of workplace-based initiative. Ravi mentioned pensions. Absolutely. The council passed a motion to divest from the regional staff pension fund over 2 years ago, and absolutely nothing's happened because that's been resisted by the Board of Trustees and their advisors. We should be making a fuss about that, because if we're not too careful, then the fossil-based assets will become worthless, and those pension funds will be the slowest to react, and all the members of those pension funds will suffer as a result of that loss of value. National policy, fossil subsidies, that goes back to the argument, and there's plenty of money. There's hundreds of millions being invested in fossil industry still, despite all the declarations of transition to zero carbon, etc. That's crazy. Got to stop. And the other thing CanWM has been campaigning on, which might be something to consider, is fare free public transport. It's happening now in over 100 cities. It's perfectly feasible. It's another example of where the right investment at the right time would reap benefits for a large number of currently disadvantaged people, like low-waged and youth. It could be phased in. And it could be trialled during the Commonwealth Games, for example. So, you know, there is practical stuff which would make a big difference to people's day-to-day lives that we could be lobbying for and supporting, with the support of the relevant workplace unions like bus drivers and the people who work within the public transport sector. Those are just a few ideas. So I'd like, hopefully at the end of this meeting, that we've got some way forward, that practical things that people want to actually contribute to, and move this forward collectively.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julian, for his excellent contribution. Okay, round of applause. No one needs to help, please. Yeah, I have time now for questions. There's 2 questions that's been raised on the chat line already, but please, can you assist by putting your questions on the chat line so we can acknowledge them each in turn, okay? All questions, please, on the chat line. Naeem, would you like to read out the first of the 2 questions?
Thank
so
you.
far?
Well, I was sent 2 questions by email earlier today. And the first one is, the question is particularly for Liam Byrne, MP and Councillor Trickett, which is, if we are going to be serious about combating climate change, then isn't it time to oppose environmentally disastrous projects like HS2, which is destroying large areas of irreplaceable ancient woodland that we need to absorb carbon, and also to oppose the expansion of Birmingham Airport, which, if the predicted 40% increase in passenger numbers actually happens, will significantly increase the West Midlands carbon footprint. And the second question is along the lines of, when do you think we will start to see simple changes such as food waste recycling and widely available bike storage facilities, already the norm across big cities, which will be essential in the broader goal of becoming carbon neutral, and then ask people to put questions on? Okay, so those are the 2 questions that have been put. Could people remind you to put questions on the chat line if you want to ask them?
Okay. Liam or Lisa, which one of you would like to go first? Lisa? If you can unmute, please.
I was rather welcoming Liam going first on that one. HS2 is clearly a hugely contentious subject in terms of the climate and the environment. I think there is a degree, it has gone so far and the investment has gone so far that it is almost inevitable. So how do you claw back and ensure and mitigate the damage that could be done? And importantly, how do we actually ensure it increases capacity so that the stuff that's currently being moved around on our roads can be moved around on our rail? So to me, the key value on HS2 is potentially the capacity it could build and the clearly some of the broader jobs and connectivity it will create. I sincerely take a view that airport expansions are not the subjects that we should be pursuing, and that we need to look much more clearly at a national level as to what we do about air travel. Because again, there is always a danger where, for example, Manchester has shares in a number of airports. They will have built in their business plans, in their long-term financial plans, they will have built in an expectation of revenue returns. And that's where I was trying to sort of say earlier, the difficulty we have with this is it's a really complicated system change, and that we've already got concreted into the system some significant problems. So it's actually about hitting the areas that will make a difference and make an impact. And people have referenced them tonight. You know, the building the homes, the retrofitting the homes, the transitioning the businesses and the companies, and particularly the workers. In terms of food waste recycling, I have a strong view that there are opportunities to do community-based food waste recycling. You can now actually get small AD plants in my ward, Liam's ward, any ward constituent, any area of our city where you have terraced housing or back those sort of inner city roads, you will have back alleyways that are an absolute nightmare. There is now the technology to allow us to put food waste plants within those alleyways and light those areas. That could be a community facility. And to me, that's where we have to think out the box a little bit. How do you actually create a benefit? In terms of bike facilities, well, I've been accused now, there's me and John Burke currently being highlighted in a number of Twitter things as apparently I'm in the thrall of the Lycra cycle lobby, but I definitely believe we have to have proper bike storage, we have to have proper bike sharing. And one of the big things that's doing my head in at the moment about HS2 at the interchange is they're building road islands, they're not building multimodal transport systems. There's no talk about the bikes, there's no talk about the actual zero carbon travel. And to me, that is the biggest problem. What they're not doing is they're connecting a rail to road, and what we should be doing is taking vehicles off the road and creating the zero carbon opportunity.
Thank you, Lisa. Liam?
Yep, thank you. So we had a bit of this debate at a really good call about a week and a half ago that Greenpeace very helpfully organised. And, you know, the first principle in the XR manifesto is tell the truth. And I think it's important that we do tell the truth about where High Speed 2 has got to. And I think, as Lisa said, it's pretty much unstoppable now. The truth is that the legislation's gone through, the building has started. By the time, you know, there is a change of government in 4.5 years' time, this will be a project that has, you know, gone further. And, you know, from my point of view, representing the constituency with the highest youth unemployment in Britain, the second highest unemployment, High Speed 2 is good for jobs in East Birmingham. It's a game changer. It could create something like 60 to 80,000 jobs in my part of the world. And I've got to look at that when you serve a community like mine. Now that said, what I think is the area where we can make some substantial progress is campaigning with High Speed to reduce its carbon footprint and to reduce the proposed damage to woodlands. And so actually, as promised, I met with the Chief Executive of High Speed 2 last Friday to make these points to him and to say that I want to now start working with him in order to begin figuring out how we minimize the carbon impacts. He's very open to that dialogue. And so I think we want to be trying to develop a few specific proposals that we want to start pushing through with High Speed 2. So a couple of those opportunities include modal shift, as Lisa said. So the capacity that's created on West Coast Main Line by taking the traffic off the West Coast Main Line, putting it on the new railway, that's enough capacity to take about 1 million trucks off the road. That a year, that has a pretty significant impact on potentially declogging the M5, the M6, the M42, and transforming air quality in those areas. We have to lean into that now by actually using the mayor's clean air powers, which he does not use. You know, around the freight routes, the mayor actually has some pretty interesting and important clean air powers that could be used to help drive modal shift. He's not doing that. I think the second thing that we can be doing is we can be saying to High Speed 2, they need to look at what more they can put underground. So at the moment, I think there are something like 32 miles of tunnel on High Speed 2. We need to be exploring whether increasing the tunnels basically helps ameliorate the proposed damage to 43 of Britain's 52,000 ancient woodland sites, which are affected by High Speed 2. Certainly that's the negotiation I led for my constituency. We got the tunnel extended basically so that it had less of an impact on Hodge Hill. As some of you know, it comes under the Bromford. It was going to come out in a place actually that would have involved pretty significant damage to my community. And, you know, I won a battle in Parliament to get that tunnel extended to ameliorate that damage. And I think that potentially the third area is demanding that there is greater carbon offset. Now, one of the ways in which we can do that is by actually asking High Speed 2 to help us take a lead in replanting the forest of Arden. So as some people know, there's only been one national forest planted in Britain since Tudor times. It goes from Charnwood to Milkwood. It's about 200 square miles now. We should be, I think, trying to create a second national forest in the West Midlands. It's not, you know, you'd need a forest the size of Tunisia to absorb all the carbon emissions that the West Midlands currently emits. We're not going to obviously do that. But I think we should be creating almost like a municipal system of woodland carbon units that we ask High Speed 2 to help kickstart. And then I think we should be saying to all businesses in the West Midlands, look, if you want to go carbon neutral, these are the woodland carbon units that you can purchase to do that. And that will go towards helping replant the forest scape in our region. So I think, you know, the truth is that we're into an amelioration strategy now, but I think there are some very practical things that we can do to use the levers of power in the West Midlands to advance that agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Liam. The next question will be from Bob Whitehead. Bob, if you can unmute, please. Bob?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll put it in the chat. But I'm saying that given the environmental need to curb aviation and reduce road transport and stop ancient woodland being cut down, isn't it high time we reinvested all this money, this vast amount of money going into road building and airport expansion and HS2 in something more socially useful? I'm talking about a fare free public transport system in the localities up and down the country. To me, it's the only way you will get the cars off the road. Just having a top down, you can't drive here, you can't drive there, will create a backlash. you've got to provide a carrot. And to me, we should follow the example of 100 cities around the world, nearest one Dunkirk, by the way, in implementing a fare free public transport system. That'll obviously be very expensive, but the money is there for airport expansion, it's there for road building, it's there for HS2, it's going to the wrong place. Time for a complete change of priorities.
Okay. Now, the next question will be Melanie Cruz. Melanie? Melanie, are you there? Can you unmute? Oh, I think we've lost Melanie. Oh. Okay, in that case.
Oh, she's there. She's there. Just 1 second.
She is there. Oh, Melanie?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, can you switch your video and ask it? Yeah, your question, please.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask all speakers, all the proposals and ideas, I think they're very interesting and potentially feasible for the city. But my question has more to do with what is the political argument that we're moving forward in the city to gain support from workers, regular people who might not be so knowledgeable about all these practical and technocratic changes that are being moved forward or they want to be put forward. So what is the political argument that in this case, the Labour Party as the MP who spoke and the councillors and also the unions, what is the political argument we moving forward? What is the base we're building for that political consent in the city that will support these proposals, because these are transformational things that are going to change people's life. Not always are going to be easy transitions. And I don't see that just the technocratic aspect of it will make the case for our city. I think it needs to be a political discussion as well. But I don't see that coming from either the Labour Party or the unions, for example. So I just wonder what the speakers have to say about that. Thank you.
Okay. Now the next question, there'll be 3 more for this round. There'll be more questions later. Stephen Booth. Stephen, can you unmute please and raise your question? Are you there, Stephen? No, okay. The next question then will be Tim Weller. Tim Weller.
Right, so my question is this. For me, the climate emergency is all about cutting spending, because what we take today, we won't have tomorrow. We live in a finite world of finite resources, yet we think we're living infinitely on an infinite planet, which we ain't. So the £15 billion that Transport for West Midlands are now spending on metro extensions, in my opinion, should be going towards Bob Whitehead's excellent fare-free public transport. The problem with metro extensions is that they simply duplicate and replace existing bus routes that ought to be having electric buses on bus priority bus lanes. And you don't complicate life by having more and more different modes of transport, like bus, tram, and train. So on the Black Country Railway, we're getting just that. Please, no train, tram, train, railway between Worcester, Black Country, Derby. Scrap the Midland Metro extension from Wednesbury to Brierley Hill. Please, Liam, when you get elected on the 6th of May next year, which I hope you are, you've got to stand up to the transport people at 16 Summer Lane and say no more Midland Metro, just get the railway lines restored for railway trains and not trams. So we don't have this slow business of having to change so often between tram, train and bus. Let's just have not bus on rails, trams on roads, but direct electric buses going on roads without the rails, meeting not bus on rails trams on the railway lines, but simply electric trains on the railway lines, like the one from Stourbridge Junction through to Burton-on-Trent. 56 kilometres that needs trains on the whole lot, please, Liam, not trams, not cycles, not a test track for very light rail, just commuter and regional trains to finish that link to help Birmingham as well as the Black Country. Thanks very much.
Okay. Now, would like any of the speakers like to reply to those questions?
Can I take, firstly, Melanie, thank you so much for your question, because it's a really important one in terms of actually succeeding in the transition, because unless we do get the consent of the people, unless we do get the demand for action, we won't deliver in time. So absolutely building the movement, building the narrative, and getting people to understand that actually climate action can work for them. And that's, I think, a key thing. Too often when we talk about climate action or we talk about just transition, they're words, but if you're actually worried about how you're going to heat your home or feed your kids, you want to know what that action is going to do for you. So I think very much that actually climate action to me is about creating an economic system, a new economic system that serves our communities and grows communities for good. I spent today doing quite a bit with people on housing retrofit, and it did my head in, because it was people who wanted to explain about retrofit assessors or property archetypes, or then somebody else who wanted to give their digital process improvement for smart metering or something. And it was, we still have to remember on things like housing retrofit, we have a product nobody at the moment wants. You do not get out of bed in the morning and think, I know what I've got to do. I've got to get my house retrofitted. You might get out of bed and think, I've got to get a cheaper energy supplier. Or if you're an older person, I need to get my care and support sorted out. You need to actually, we need to understand what drives, what motivates people, and then design the interventions to actually respond to that. So to me, it's about making climate action work for communities and in our city and region. Just picking up on a point about trains and metros, and I'm not going into a huge argument on this. I think one thing that is interesting, we actually have a train route at the moment that connects quite a large swathe of East Birmingham through Tynesy Station, Lapworth, where we have a huge amount of people driving in, the Warwickshire region, into Birmingham. What we need to look at is how we decarbonise those kind of transport routes now, and actually how we make them more effective. And certainly that's where I think there's a real argument for hydrogen, and actually hydrogen fueling some of those more local train networks. And in terms of buses, what we do need to look at is National Express seems to have a massive monopoly within this region. It seems to have managed to secure investment that I really can't comprehend. And I think we have to look at where we have franchising powers, where we actually also enable local community approaches. Hospitals spend a fortune in a normal period on taxi fares to get people to hospital. Local authorities pay on their transport for children with additional needs. We need to look at how we move people and products around our cities and find a way to actually move them in a coherent way. And that does not necessarily mean that you look at how you move workers separate to how you move children with additional needs. And I'll leave other comments for colleagues.
Okay.
I'll just pick up a couple of those points.
One moment, please. One moment.
Sorry.
Any other speaker like to reply to the questions?
Yeah, I'll let Liam go first, but I'd like to comment back if I can, Ian, please.
Okay, Liam.
Yeah, thanks. Just 2 points really. So, Melanie, that is a brilliant question, and it's one that we've been researching a lot with voters. And what we've basically found is two things. So, especially now, people are most worried about jobs, the economy and unemployment. That's the #1 issue by a mile amongst residents. And what they're worried about is that we need to recover first and then go green, because they think there's an impression, there's a perception that green is somehow more expensive. And they feel uncomfortable about believing that because they know green is the future. It's almost like white heat. It's become a cipher for the future. It's positive, it's optimistic. They can see bits of it happening. What we found is that the dilemma dissolves when we talk about green manufacturing and the ambition for our region to become the capital of green manufacturing, one of the world's great centres for making the technologies that the world needs to go carbon neutral. And so we will begin talking about that a lot because it's one of our strengths. It's one of the ways that we create jobs. It's one of the ways that we reclaim our history, our tradition, our legacy as a great manufacturing centre. And that, I think, could well be a really potent economic story about jobs. The second thing that cuts through is cleaner air. So people noticed the air was cleaner during lockdown, interestingly. And people are sort of quite shocked when they find out how bad the air quality is in their neighbourhoods. And so I've got a sneaking suspicion that one of the most effective things that we could do is actually start putting big air quality monitors up in playgrounds so that parents can actually see, for example, the impact of driving their kids to school as opposed to finding alternative means of transport. If they can see how poisonous the air is in their kids' playground, actually, I think that could have quite a significant effect on behavioural change. Ravi also mentioned the thing about bills, which I think is a third line of argument. You know, we have well over 250,000 people in energy poverty in our region. Many of those people, by the way, live in a pretty unregulated private rented sector. And one of the things that they've been testing in places like New York is introducing an obligation on private landlords that they're not allowed to rent out their property unless it meets net zero carbon standards. That could dramatically help us lift people, thousands and thousands of people, out of energy poverty. And then on trams, I won't have a big argument about this either. I don't recognise the 15 billion figure. I've never seen that figure before. Certainly the immediate ask in the West Midlands Combined Authority budget is about 900 million for the East Birmingham Metro, which I've campaigned for many years. The key here, though, is two things. We've got to decarbonise good transport spines. That does mean electrifying the buses as well as taxis. That's very good, by the way, for LEVC, based in Coventry, as well as trams and rail. The crucial bit, though, is then the last mile. So how do you get from your front door to your local transport node? Have you got a cycle route that's lit and where you feel safe? Are there safe walking routes? Have you got routes that you would feel comfortable with your kids cycling along to get to school? Most of the answers to that in my constituency in Hodge are no, no, no. And so just really focusing on the practical stuff. You know, the most popular transport measure that's come back in 4,000 survey returns that have come back to us is cutting down on speeding. So, you know, actually making sure that roads are safer because traffic is slower. That is the kind of change. It's not glamorous, it's not sexy, but it's actually what people care about. And driving through, I think, some of the changes that we need to the last mile between the transport node and your front door, I think will be, you know, one of the things that we've got to drive through. It's very hyper local politics, I would say.
Thank you, Liam. Jules, would you like to make a reply?
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, excellent question. I've done a ton of work in the NHS when I had a day job on change, and one of the mantras that was hammered into us early on was people don't necessarily object to change, they object to change being imposed upon them. And I think some of the backlash we've witnessed around the temporary, experimental, whatever we call them, low traffic neighbourhoods from irate car drivers is because nobody told them it was happening. There was a thing last week, I believe, Manchester Met Uni without any notice at all, the university authorities, for some mysterious reason, decided to put a 7-foot fence around one of the major halls of residence, which was promptly demolished by the students because they thought they'd been imprisoned. You know, people get upset about these things. Conversely, if you listen to people and understand their concerns, and I think the recent Climate Assembly UK is a very good example of this, it's a proper statistical cross-section of population, people coming in with all kinds of preconceptions, or none, maybe. Very well professionally briefed and moderated discussion, and they came out at the end of it 70–80% saying, wow, this is serious, we need to do something. Here's some ideas that we think would work, that, you know, me in my situation with my family where I live would be acceptable. Now that's, you know, over the space of, I think, four meetings, 4 weekends. So if you listen to people and understand where they're coming from, and this echo what Liam just said, it has to be a hyper-local thing because these issues vary. Another good example, a couple of years back, I was talking to one of the behaviour change people in the council who was working on air quality at the time, and sadly they'd engaged some people in London to do the work, but they'd done outreach work and they'd run a session just down the road from me in Stratford Road in a community centre with local mums, you know, there with their buggies and all the rest of it, and who knew nothing about microparticles and NOx before they came in, and the effect that was having on their children's well-being and health. And when they went out, they were livid, absolutely livid, and fired up to do something. So, you know, if you give people the space, listen to their concerns, explain things in plain language, and let them come up with the solutions that they think would work for them, then that's transformational. And that is part of the just transition, because at the moment we live in a society of learned helplessness, where all the big policy decisions and investment decisions are made by them, somewhere else, by people we don't know, and then stuff is done to us. That's how it works at the moment. A tiny minority of people make all the big decisions. And what we're talking about is ultra democracy, localism, transparency, and frankly, mutual respect, because there's a massive issue here about the cultural and class divisions in our society, where the empowered people feel it's their right to make decisions on other people's behalf. Just to take a very particular example about traffic, we've got to get rid of cars. Cars are inherently inequitable. They benefit the people who can afford to own and run one, and stuff everybody else, which is actually the majority of the population. So for people to moan and say, oh, it's another attack on the motorist, is actually missing the point if we're talking about justice, social justice. We've got to have a city where everybody can move around freely and safely in a mode that they think is acceptable for them and their families, that gets them where they want to be, whether it's shopping or work or entertainment or whatever it is, without being dependent on the private motor car, because that just disadvantages all the people who haven't got one. So 20 mph limits everywhere around the city that are enforced, that would make a big difference. And then all the other initiatives we've heard talked about in terms of boosting public transport and so on would gradually cut the number of cars. And going back to what Ravi said earlier, I don't think we're talking about enforced removal of cars from people. We've got to create a situation in a city where there's no advantage in having a car. It's a liability. It's just a cash sink. Get rid of them.
Okay. The next question will be Richard Hatcher. Richard, can you unmute?
Yeah, good. Okay. Liam is standing for Mayor of the West Midlands Combined Authority, so I want to ask him about what changes he thinks are needed in that, although this applies to all of us, because those changes won't happen unless we are all pressing for them. Liam's draft manifesto promises a revolution in municipal socialism, including changing the way we work and ensuring the combined authority is a new power base. And I think Liam makes some good proposals, but they need to go further. The fact is the combined authority is a very undemocratic body. It's dominated by business interests, almost no trade union representation, and no public participation at all. I could give examples if I had time. The board has, for example, 3 representatives of bosses organisations, 1 trade unionist. The scrutiny committee that Lisa chairs actually has on it business representatives with a vote, although there are no trade union representatives and no representatives of communities or climate organisations. If we're going to have a just transition, they have to be able to participate in the combined authority as trade unionists, as community representatives, and as climate activists. So my proposal, just to finish, Chair, is that the combined authority under Mayor Liam Byrne sets up a climate emergency forum with full representation on it of community organisations, climate campaigners and workers, and that meets regularly and holds the combined authority to account. I hope you'll support that.
Okay. The next question will be Alistair Wingate. Alistair, can you unmute? Alistair, yeah, okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering really with Liam as well, with Liam Byrne, I was just wondering with the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, it's been signed by 69 MPs now, and it's a really important bill. It's a private member's bill that's been put into Parliament. It's a really important bill that I think every progressive MP should sign. I mean, it's really calling for, you know, all the things that you're calling for, a just transition. It's also calling for, you know, conservation of our own resources to make sure that we actually, you know, try and conserve our own habitats while we're having this changeover as well. And it's also, you know, that the UK factors in all of its pollutions. For example, it doesn't currently use it. I don't think it uses shipping, or even parts of the aviation industry are excluded from its carbon figures as well. So there's a whole range of very, very good measures proposed in this bill. So I'd have thought you would be jump at the chance to sign this, the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, Liam.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Would the speakers like to reply to those 2 questions, please? Liam, yes?
Yeah, so on the bill, that is something I do support. I'm just checking because I thought actually our name had gone down on it. Alex Sobel was coordinating it for a bunch of Labour MPs, but certainly Alex's work, Alex has led on a lot of the XR relationships in Parliament for Labour, with which I've helped him. On the governance, so one of the proposals, so first you're right, basically trade unions have had to fight for a seat at the table in a way that was just hopelessly inappropriate, I thought. One of the ideas that I proposed was this idea of an economic justice commission that actually institutionalized a role for trade unions in the way that we set the North Star of economic policy for the combined authority. And I think just sort of building on something Julian said, really, we've got a slight challenge here in that we've actually got to we've got to become really skillful at brokering consensus at a local level. And so, you know, I don't have a philosophical problem with creating that climate emergency group at a kind of a corporate level, but I think we just need to reflect on whether that is going to do what we want it to do, which is to actually make sure that we have got consensus building at the hyper-local level, because I do think that that is where change is going to come from. So one of the reasons that we proposed this idea of co-op innovation districts, for example, is that, you know, I've got maybe 15 smaller communities across Hodge Hill where I pretty much know the players that I could get round a table to begin coordinating action in a way that local communities would roll with. And a lot of that work would be educational, because as Julian says, people just don't know how poisonous the air is in our city at the moment. They don't know the damage that is doing to children. They don't know the damage that is doing to health inequalities, which is a pronounced issue in many of our ethnic minority communities, which have had such a higher fatality rate during COVID. So that's, I think, what we've got to think about. And I think it is a challenge for the Labour movement, because I just don't think we're good enough at this yet, to be honest. I don't think we have yet mastered the skill set that we need to consensus build at that kind of local level. And I think we've just got to be a bit cautious about creating talking shops at a kind of a corporate level when the sharp end of action is actually round sets of streets. Anyway, I think that's something that, for those who can join the call with Darren Jones and Matthew Pennycook next week, that would definitely be something we'd put to them, because I think the Citizens Assembly work was really useful. I'm quite interested in how you create almost like a standing Citizens Assembly, because I think the flow of decisions that we're going to need to take will be quite significant. We're not going to get it all right, at once, and we're just going to need good ways of navigating this. And I think a standing Citizens Assembly may be one of the things that we explore. But let's figure this out between now and when we have to put a manifesto out in kind of February, March next year.
Thank you, Liam. Julian, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Yeah, I agree about the standing conference concept, and a lot of people have learned a lot in the last 6 months about working effectively online. So we're no longer constrained. Well, this is not universally true, but a lot of people are digitally excluded, and we have to do positive measures to make sure they're included as well. But a lot of people could now participate in a way which was not known or not thinkable a year ago. So that's one point. The point I wanted to make in response to what Liam said about getting better at, in effect, localism is as a spin-off from the Council Task Force, there was a Commons Engagement subgroup. And one of the things that was proposed there was a development of a support package for councillors to run ward level forum meetings about matters of concern like air quality and traffic and fuel poverty, or whatever, and jobs, especially at the moment. That wasn't so much of an issue when we first proposed it. And Birmingham Council have not supported that at all. I've proposed it to a few councillors and got no feedback at all. So I think what we're talking about is basically a deeply ingrained culture where the people who are used to making decisions either are unwilling or don't have the capacity to change the way they operate and engage more people in that decision-making process. Democracy is hard work, takes time, takes a lot of effort, and there are plenty of people in this current system that we're trying to change through a just transition who I think probably perceives that being more democratic wouldn't do them any good, especially people who benefit most from the current economic system. So we're going to have to fight for this, and we're going to have to pull our socks up a bit as a movement if we're going to make it happen.
Lisa?
Okay, couple of points, and I think I haven't got a fully formed view on the most appropriate sort of future governance around climate action or indeed economic recovery in our region, because I think I'm fairly clear that what we have now is not working. But what we also all need to appreciate, whether you are a representative of the business community, trade union community, or a political activist, is actually we can't use the same tools that help create this crisis. We all have to change. And I think that is there's a lot that we need to do to challenge ourselves and understand how we go about that change. And one of the things that we've talked to some to the GMB and others about is this idea of moving from positional negotiation to directional negotiation. So what we say is, absolutely, we want jobs with the same sort of pay, terms, conditions, but those jobs could be in a different sphere or sector. But what skills do we need to draw on and develop further to take you through that transition? And you actually start to actually think about what also you capture is Liam's point. Some people have really enjoyed working from home, really had the chance to spend times with their kids. And people, some of the guys I've spoken to and women, they'll actually trade certain things that they used to have. And again, what we've got to do is put our value, a whole value on that lived experience. And that's what we're not very good at. So I do think we need to actually look again at how we negotiate for that better future. I do also believe that you have to have change at every sphere of governance and at every spatial scale. But if you're going to drive this, then it has to be hyperlocal. And it has to actually be where you're immersed in the experience and the change that is required, because it's at that local level. I've spent quite a bit of time in Druids Heath at the earliest part of this year. And it's actually just by being on that estate, talking to it, experiencing some of the stories women tell you, and just seeing how bloody dysfunctional the housing service is there, that you understand the issues. No amount of data or shared report could help. And that's why partly we're talking about community learning platforms, that we need to create in communities a space where we can try and do something different and actually be prepared to fail, because that's the other issue. If you're going to be innovative, you have to be prepared to fail. And one of the things, and clearly I bear the scars of this LTN process, a lot of my community and my ward had actually been calling for low traffic neighbourhoods. I'm a politician. I do not go in to something that my electorate is not going to like. I am a politician enough to not risk that. People conveniently forget where actually voices have been heard and where different views come through. What I think we have learned, and again, it comes back to actually our system and our bureaucracy is not equipped to deal with it. I'm very clear, this is democracy in practice, that if residents start saying that plant is in the wrong place, we move it. If a residents say these yellow lines haven't worked for us, we experiment with it. And the speed by which the council's bureaucracy can respond to that hasn't helped. Neither has obviously government and the Tories trying to, quite frankly, stir it, having actually told us to accelerate action on this. So I think we have to be much more ready and find ways where we can experiment. And again, I actually think that's where the mayor and the region, there's some real opportunities to use the power to convene and to almost seed corn some innovative localized approaches. So actually we learn and engage through experience, not expecting somebody to sit at a table, because quite frankly, that's quite boring.
Okay, thanking Lisa. Ravi, would you like to make any replies? Are you there, Ravi? No. Okay.
Yeah, so I suppose I just want to go back on the question that was that Melanie raised, because I just think it cuts to what this is all about. We've got to be able to make the case to ordinary people about how this is going to improve their lives. And I think it just does come down to some simple things. People will get good quality jobs. People will be able to provide an environment where their children are not going to suffer from air pollution, and we're going to keep the houses warm. And if you keep it simple like that, people will get that. And it's almost like the green part of it comes after that.
Yeah.
We need to make it about how are you just going to make people's lives better on a day-to-day basis, on an immediate day-to-day basis. And the fact that it's green is, like I say, is just an offshoot and a benefit of that. So it's about that simple messaging. So, you know, we're going to put money in your pocket with a decent job. We're going to keep your houses warm, and we're going to make sure your kids are healthy. Who's not going to like? What's not to like there? That's the way that we've got to. That's the way I think we've got to argue. That's the way you have to argue all change in politics. Actually, you've got to make it simple for people and make them understand how it's going to make an improvement to their everyday lives. So, you know, I'm not an expert in political messaging, but I'm sure there are people out there who can do that for us. That's all I would add.
Okay, thank you, Ravi. Can we now have a summing up, please, by Jules Todd?
Ian, I've indicated an hour ago, you know, why am I being excluded? Can you explain that?
No, you're not excluded. Behave yourself.
Well, I am. I've been indicating for an hour, and
you know the rules. On the chat line, please. Don't make a fool of yourself.
I'm not making a fool of myself. You're being
undemocratic. Can you do the summing up, please, Jules?
Thanks, Ian. No pressure. We've covered an awful lot of ground tonight, and broadly speaking, I think we're all strongly agreed that something needs to be done. The trade union movement as an organised body with a set of values about social justice and all the rest of it is crucial in this just transition, and that if we don't fight for climate justice at a local level, nobody else will, frankly. We have the incentive and the power base to do it if we choose to. There've been several conversations about how to reach out and how to engage people. And one of the critical things, which we haven't had time to cover, but I assure you there's a ton of really useful material around, is the use of language which is relevant and understandable for ordinary folk. Because, you know, if you take climate change, you know, is it the greenhouse effect? Is it global warming? Is it climate change? Is it climate chaos? Yada, 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 yada. Why are we ranting on about 1.5 degrees? I wish it was a bit warmer. I've been out trying to, you know, leaflet and get petitions with Bob in the peeing rain, and people are going, oh, I wish it was a bit warmer. You know, it's a valid point. What are we on about? You know, we've got to communicate with people in a way which is intelligible and relevant to their day-to-day lived experience. And yes, address their priorities. And right now, top of the list is actually putting food on the table, having a job. If you've just lost your job, getting access to retraining so you can do something different. These are absolutely critical day-to-day issues for people. And if we're not addressing those, we're failing. I believe, I'm convinced that we can do that in a way which we don't have to do it first and then go green, because then we've wasted an opportunity. If you're talking about building new affordable housing, then let's build new affordable zero carbon housing, and then we've got 2 wins. That's perfectly possible. The technology exists. We just need to channel the investment. And channeling investment means lobbying like crazy, using our workplace and industrial muscle to get the money to flow to the right things at the right time in the right place, which it currently is not doing. And we've had several examples of that, at least a debate about whether it's going in the right direction. So what I'm particularly keen to know is, for the people who are still on the call, and anybody that Naeem and Ian know who's been on the call and has left, because I guess there's a network of supporters of BTUC, who is interested in taking some of these practical action points forward that have been proposed by various people, maybe in a one-off meeting or bringing it forward to the next BTUC meeting. I don't know how you want to do that, but is anybody interested in doing stuff, taking action which helps engage the trade union movement and workplaces in this struggle?
Okay. Thank you, Julian, for this summing up. Now, I did point out that all questions tonight had to go via the chat line in order to ensure fairness. Now, time is almost up now. If I can thank Liam, Lisa, Lamar, Ravi, and Jules Todd for their excellent contributions and replies they made to all the questions we've had so far. There will be further meetings coming up at later dates, and you'll have a chance to raise your questions there too. Tonight is only the first of many, of hopefully many more such meetings to come. Okay, thanking all of you for your attendance tonight. I wish all of you not a safe journey home, but a safe journey, a safe night in at home, self-isolating, keeping warm and dry, and looking forward to seeing you all again. Okay, good night all.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Cheers.